For you, what is the most significant point of discussion between those two leaders?
Well, I think both sides are saying the fact that they're even meeting to discuss anything is the biggest takeaway. We are facing a bunch of issues right now, security, economic, that as the two most powerful countries in the world, the United States and China, need to be able to collaborate and talk about these issues together. And if we don't have routine and sustained and predictable visits between the two leaders, this becomes increasingly difficult. And it's hard to sustain anything that they might even agree to at this visit. And so really what I'll be looking for is not only the types of topics that they're going to discuss and what's on the agenda, but whether or not they actually have any sort of frank exchange.
I'm interested to dig into really the perfect points around your book that's forthcoming. The idea that they've built up, China in particular, has built up this power, whether it be militarily, whether it be economically, whether it be entrepreneurially in many ways. But you sort of outline how, and it's through strategic emulation, through exploitation, through entrepreneurship. And I'm interested from the tech perspective, whether all this tit for tat that we continue to see, particularly when it's limitations to access to chips, for example, just is going to be the norm. Would that be your policy recommendation?
Well, I think the prediction would be that China is going to be somewhat entrepreneurial in its approach to this tech competition. In many cases, when I talk to investors, they often express some frustration with the economic decisions that China makes at home. But as I lay out in the book, party control is one of the main factors that decides for China which strategy they're going to pursue. And a lot of times they can't emulate what the United States is doing because it's not conducive for their domestic political system at home. So they have to go another route. Sometimes that route is relatively ineffective, like we see with soft power, and perhaps the speed at which the renminbi is becoming a reserve currency without loosening capital controls. That's going to be difficult for China. But I have no doubt that as they face these new challenges, they're going to try to think of new ways to exploit their own competitive advantages, gaps in the international system, for example, and standards and other areas that are important for technology to still try to get ahead.
Dr. Mastro, corporate America, according to our reporting, is doing everything it can to get into that room and have dinner with President Xi. You heard us outline earlier in the program about the technology export curbs in place. Do you think that Xi can have any kind of leverage? He can use the interest of technology CEOs in meeting him to go to Biden and say, look, everyone wants to do business here?
I am highly doubtful that that would work. Honestly speaking, not only from the U.S. perspective, but also from the Chinese perspective. With Xi Jinping, power is more important than prosperity. There's many decisions that we have seen him make that if economic prosperity were the #1 priority, he would have done something completely different. I think the COVID-0 policy is a perfect example of that. And the same for the United States. National security now trumps all things. The Chinese military has been modernizing at a pace and a speed and at a level that it now presents a threat to the United States. And so we can no longer turn a blind eye to certain technologies that can be dual use. And so perhaps those leaders will get into the room and have a very pleasant meeting with Xi Jinping. But I don't think he's going to change his approach to technology control at home. That is important for his own control over the country, and is not going to convince the United States to put itself at risk for the sake of economic prosperity.
We have seen such a change in supply chains, whether it's been focused through COVID, whether or not it's been the geopolitics at play. Ultimately, the corporates that you speak to about this, is that just going to be the narrative going forward? We are going to see more of a bifurcation or not?
Well, I really hope it doesn't get to that level of a complete bifurcation in two different blocks. I was in China 2 weeks ago having a dialogue with the Chinese, and they have the often retort that the United States is trying to contain them. You know, U.S. policy and limited export controls is no way a containment of China. And I hope we don't move in that direction because our economies are quite interdependent. But I think what we're seeing is a lot of leaders understand that de-risking is important, whether it's supply chains for the United States so we can continue to fight wars if we have to, or for leaders that might have manufacturing hubs within China. It is important to have a plan B because this is not the Cold War. The United States and China have some conflicting interests, and it's possible that the two sides find themselves at blows.